and welcome to Victims and Villains. If you guys are new to our show, we are a podcast extension of the nonprofit which educates and engages individuals on mental health awareness and suicide prevention through pop culture. And all December long, we have been talking about the Matrix series leading up to the brand new one, Matrix Resurrections. Before we get into it, I just want to tell you guys right here at the top of the show, hope you guys had a great holiday. Hope you guys are looking forward to New Year's. We have some awesome things planned for 2022, including our first ever film festival. So if you guys go to filmfreeway.com/horrific hope film festival, you guys can get all the details. This is the first festival of its kind that's horror centric and mental health focused. And we're looking right now for features and shorts in the horror genre and horror adjacent. And when I say horror adjacent, we're talking films that are outside of the horror genre that are focusing on other things from other genres, from comedy or drama or just a number of animation that are all focusing and all fixating on things like depression, mental health, sexual assault, important topics, and real life horror. So you guys go to filmfreeway.com/horrific hope film festival. We would love to see your nightmares, and submissions are open right now until January 15th is our next deadline, and then we'll be accepting them until February 12th, 2022. But the festival itself will be on April 29th and 30th. So yeah, let's go ahead and jump into this. From the Feelin' Film podcast, I am joined once again by Mr. Kalles.
Happy holidays, everybody. I hope everybody had a good time on Christmas, spending time with family, and hopefully not watching this film.
This is going to be an interesting conversation. We're talking about the Matrix Resurrections on this episode, and I'm going to jump in here on the chat right now on Twitch. Russell Graham is joining us. He says, hey, it's Russell from the Con in Richmond. What's going on, man? Welcome to hanging out with us for Matrix Resurrections, where I'm just going to put this up here. We're going to be spoiling the mess out of this movie. It has been playing in theaters for a few days now, and it's been streaming on HBO Max at this point as well for a few days. But Kalles, let's go ahead and get into it, man, because this entire series, all month long, we have been talking specifically about our hesitations and our reservations for what this movie was going to be, and also simultaneously why it kind of also felt unnecessary. But what were your thoughts on this movie?
It's a mess. It's a film that is frustrating because it starts off so promising. When we're introduced in the beginning of this film, we see a Neo, we see a Thomas Anderson, but it seems to be in this different reality. And what you're led to believe is that the events of the Matrix, all of the Matrix films, are something that came from Thomas's head, and he has now decided to make them to a video game. He doesn't understand where these memories are coming from, but it almost seems to be a creation of his mind. And I thought we were going to get a more discussion onto are the events of the Matrix, did they really happen, or was this just a video game designed by Thomas Anderson, a guy that we first saw behind his laptop, his computer back in the late 90s, and in code, searching for something. Maybe he finally found something, was able to put that through technological form and giving it to the masses, and that's why we have all of this reverence and all this attention built towards the Matrix franchise. The meta and social commentary and the little bit of the mystery that first half added was something I was excited to see more of. I was locked in, ready to see where this film was going to go and what kind of mind trip it was going to give me. And then over time, you see that this film is not doing anything but just living in the past. It's honestly living off of all the great moments that the past three films brought, whether you like them or not. The Matrix series have had some legendary moments. Living off of those moments, living off of the claim of those films and just pretty much putting them into a 2021 package. But except it's not afflicting, it's not compelling, it's not even cool to look at. Like the action scenes, people in here are moving stiff. I've seen Keanu-Reeves. He plays John Wick. Keanu ain't this stiff. He does his own stunts. He's not this stiff. So there's that. There's bad makeup in this film. There's a scene where we see Jada Pinkett, who's playing an older Niobe. Literally, she's talking. It's a close-up, and her neck, the skin on her neck is not moving. You can clearly tell that she's wearing a mask of some kind. And she has a little croak in her voice, so she's trying to play old. I don't understand why they couldn't just took in an older African-American woman and put her into that role and left it at that. Also, I mean, did I say that there's a lot of fan service moments? There are a lot of fan service moments. The film begins on a fan service moment, recreating the Trinity escape, except with a new person who is not Trinity. And also the ending. Oh, we're going to have a separate discussion about that ending, because that ending was, tell you, talk about trying to burn a candle, trying to light something that's been burnt out for 20 years. That was an example of that. It's a film that really lives in nostalgia and doesn't add anything new to this story. It could have added something new, and there is some potential. There's some ambition in this film. I'm not going to lie about that. Lana definitely was trying to cram some ideas in here, but then again, I use the word cramming because she's cramming so many ideas into here that none of them are able to breathe and really take on a life of its own. It's just a film that leaves you bummed out, and especially if you invested into this series ever since the beginning. It's something that I wish was kept buried. I didn't want this to be resurrected. Keep it buried somewhere.
All right, so I'm actually going to come into the chat before I share my thoughts. We joined by Geek Devotions. They say hashtag facts to everything you just talked about. It's fan service, but it's not good fan service. Mm-hmm. Russell is also chiming in saying it was a waste of time to him. But he's like, have you guys also talked about Spider-Man No Way Home? Russell, we actually have talked about Spider-Man No Way Home. Our audio edition of that episode drops tomorrow, and the video for that podcast was actually done by our Marvel correspondents, Alan and Josh, two of our writers and podcasters here, and the full-length podcast should still be available here on Twitch. However, I am going to say that I agree with you. I think this film, for the first half of this, is a... So I actually watched this movie twice. I watched it once in the theater for our spoiler-free review, which you guys can check out on our YouTube page. I'm not going to share my thoughts here. Overall, I'm just going to say that I had a really fun time with this movie. But on my second rewatch, I tended to pick up a lot more on the things that you were talking about. So like Terminator, the last Terminator movie we got was kind of a great example, whereas like I watched that in the theaters and really liked it on my first viewing, went back a couple days later to rewatch it with a friend of mine, and came out and I was just really disappointed because I saw all of like the plot holes and just all of like the terrible CGI and everything that like just kind of kept going into that. And I think that's kind of what I got on a second rewatch. I think I really enjoy the tongue-in-cheek elements of this first film, but on the second half of this film, and I think this kind of taints the project as a whole, is that it doesn't feel like a Matrix movie. You know, when you look at the original trilogy of the Matrix looks like the Matrix actually like has like a very distinct look, distinct style. Even like the cinematography has that like that greenish tint to it, and all of like the wardrobe looks the same. The set design, like it all looks like it lives in the world. And this one kind of feels like it is so simple. And I understand I'm gonna be stepping back a little bit from what I said in my spoiler-free review, since I've seen this movie twice. But on a second viewing, I think the simplicity, what I praised it for originally, was its simplicity. But I think in the end, coming back and rewatching it, like it feels like two conflicting visions coming together to pay tribute to fan service. And I think Russell and Geek Devotions both brought up Spider-Man No Way Home, which was released a little less than a week before this one. And when you talk about fan service, that's fan service done right, because it still lives within the world that has been established, and those fan service elements don't feel like they are challenging. They're living parallel, and they are cohesive enough to actually tell a legitimately compelling story.
No Way Home is an example of where, yes, there may be some moments that are clearly aimed at making the audience clap and making the audience feel something special because they're living back, during the times of Spider-Man 1, 2, and 3. Yes, there are those moments. There's a little bit too many of them, but also look at the way that they approach the angle of the villains. If it was just a Spider-Man film where we're just bringing all these villains back so they can fight the new Spider-Man, that would have been boring. But the way they use these villains, adding a dramatic element to them, trying to find these guys help, and trying to send them back to their worlds in one piece, that is an example of what fan service done right can do. But when you're into the arena of using fan service just to tell people, hey, look at this cool thing we did so many years ago. Do you remember that? Yes. And easy people will just fall for it, call it something great, because they're bringing back memories that feel good to them. But when we're checking on this film from a storytelling aspect, not only is there not any distinct style about this film, what is the story trying to tell you? Like, we saw in Matrix Revolutions what happened. Neo saved Zion. He saved the human race. He sacrificed his life and fulfilled his mission, giving Zion and brokering the end of the war between the humans and the machines. And now we're back here again, and he's going to have to do this whole thing again? He's back having to fight another Matrix. He's back being stuck in a simulated world and trying to figure out what his purpose is. We've seen this over and over again. And if it's not too obvious, Thomas Anderson is taking blue pills in the first half of this film. If you didn't know that he was in the Matrix, yeah, he's taking blue pills, so you know what that means. And we're stuck with, hey, do you want to take the red pill or the blue pill again? We're stuck with these same moments over and over again. The only difference is that none of these moments bite. The new Agent Smith, he doesn't have any bite to him. And maybe he's not meant to, but I remember Agent Smith being the equal to Neo, being a nemesis. I didn't take this new guy seriously at all. I mean, he almost was like a fly, and Neo just needed to swat at him. He just needed to swat him one good time, and he would have been done. What is going on with the supporting team surrounding Neo? I mean, we have Bugs, and hey, she has great blue hair. She has a nice haircut. She got some style about her. She is willing to be. She's all down for the cause. She's down and dirty. Cool. But what else does she do? She's just there to just be another example for the people that Neo inspired. What difference is she from the kid in Matrix Revolutions?
I'm gonna jump in here into the chat real quick. Russell says, "Give me the green pill." And once again, her friends over at Geek Devotion says, Celeste, you are laying out some amazing facts here. And I think one of the things that hurts me most about this movie is that there is a broken Trinity here. And I'm not talking about the character of Trinity. The original trilogy, it lives and dies with Neo, Morpheus, and Trinity. And let's point blank. Look, if you've seen this, and if you've seen Aquaman and just a number of other projects that Yahya-Abdul-Mateen-ii has done, you know that the guy is a legitimately great actor, one of the best working in the business today, and he is squandered in this role. Like, I think that was the hardest part for me, is like when he breaks the character in the prologue where he's a version of Agent Smith, and then once he takes the red pill, discovering that he is Morpheus, and he gets all like goofy, like he just took like a bunch of like I don't know what I'm trying to like compare like a drug that he would be on, but like I don't know, like helium, like he just got like really silly, almost kind of like he's like sleep deprived. I don't touch drugs, so except for caffeine. Um but and then like the first meeting between like him and Neo, it's like he comes out of the bathroom stall and he says something to the effect of the setting or something along those lines, and it's like it's just so cringy, like it's terrible. And I feel like, if you're going to make a Matrix movie and you're going to have and weave in so much fan service, why pick 2 out of 3 of your core actors and rename them? But I actually I unintentionally have some facts for why this is, if you're ready for it.
Hey, I'm down. Anything that can make me kind of stomach this film a little bit better, I'm willing to take it.
Now, whether or not you can stomach it is another thing entirely. So there was this like open world video game, kind of like The Sims or like Second Life, that came out, and it is a canonical direct sequel to Matrix Revolutions. And I don't remember what the name of the video game was called, and if you guys in the chat know what I'm talking about, let me know. But the Matrix is like a direct thing, and like their version of Morpheus is Lawrence Fishburne, but he dies. And so that's the reason why it's canonical right here, that like we have a new quote Agent Smith or Morpheus, as IMDb credits him. But I will also say that do you know how this actually came to be? Also, this is an interesting fun fact.
No.
So Warner Brothers has been pursuing the Wachowski sisters to make another Matrix ever since Revolutions. And they just kept denying, they kept walking away from it, saying, hey, we want to pick other projects up. We want to do other things. And what ended up ultimately happening was the Wachowskis actually lost their parents 5 months apart from each other. And in the midst of grieving, Lana actually turned back to the Matrix because it became a source of grieving for her, and ultimately ended up that's kind of how Resurrections was birthed. It was actually birthed out of that. And if you could see some of that information, like that meta experience she talks in the middle, like the scene between Thomas and his business partner in the beginning, where he's like, oh, hey, like our parent company Warner Brothers is kind of drawing our hands, like, they want us to do another trilogy of games, and they said they're going to do it with or without us. That actually apparently happened. And all of this information comes from the podcast Wizard and the Bruiser. I'm just going to throw credit where credit is due. But yes, that's kind of where Resurrections was birthed out of grief, apparently.
Well, I can see that. I can understand why that is implemented into the film. And like I said, for the first half, I went with it because I thought that it was going to take us through the whole way. But then it seems like we switch from being meta, and then we go into the real Matrix story, if there is any story to really think about. It's pretty much just the same thing, but except this time it's all about saving Trinity. Trinity now is stuck into the Matrix, and she seems to like it, and it's going to be hard to really convince her to move out of there otherwise. So now Neo is essentially on a rescue mission, doing it for the power of love. At constant reminders of that the bond between Neo and Trinity is so much that they could blow up something. They could destroy the Matrix. They're able to come together, and there's a pretty awesome scene that they have of that later on in the film. One of the few awesome scenes that we get. But everything else about this story kind of confuses me, because what kind of confused me is, okay, so they just decided to, instead of leaving Neo and Trinity dead, they decided to use them and keep them alive as a power source to create a whole new Matrix. And it's like, okay, but I don't really understand why. I don't understand, why is there a reason to keep Neo alive for all these years? Why couldn't this be done with only Trinity? I mean, I understand that they have a powerful bond, but it seems like it was a reason to just bring these characters together and to forget the whole fact that Neo is dead in this whole other universe. It pretty much doesn't do anything to add on to Revolution's ending. It feels like that, yes, this could be a different film, but it's still yet connected to these films, and I'm not understanding what is the link between them. Because at one point it wants to make a meta-ness about it, about the Matrix itself, but then also we want to get back into a story about a new Matrix being introduced, and these worlds are colliding with each other, and I don't see why we couldn't just focus on the whole meta approach for the whole film.
Yeah, I think this movie would have been so much richer had it just approached the whole meta thing, because like as I've kind of explained throughout the course of the series, is that I am not the hugest fan of the Matrix. Like, I can respect it for what it is and what it did to the landscape of the genre, but for me, like, it's a series that I'm content to watch once in my life and never to revisit. That's completely fine with me. And that's not to say there's anything wrong with that, but I think that we talked about this when we did Resurrections, is that Revolutions feels just like a proper send-off. Like, it feels like we don't have anything else to say. But I liked the first like hour of this movie where it's like all meta, and then once you actually get into the Matrix, and like, yes, it's kind of cool to kind of see how this world has evolved, and you kind of get to see Niobe and kind of like how like the humans and the machines, the sentients as they're called in this film, have kind of learn to work together and progress society. Like, all of that stuff is interesting, but I don't need it. Like, that is like, to me, the equivalent of saying that like I needed to know how Anakin Skywalker became Darth Vader. Like, it's a cool concept to explore. I don't need a trilogy of movies to tell me how this wimpy kid became one of cinema's greatest arch enemies. Like, that to me, like, just let it like go. Like, just stay in your lane. Like, if you're gonna go meta, embrace it the way Scream did and do it from start to finish. Like, that's it. But I think you bring up a good point too, and specifically talking about the fact that like this is a new Matrix, as they've established with the Neil Patrick Harris character, who I guess we can get into if you want to, but him in particular, he says something to the extent of, like, they've kind of also like rewritten this Matrix code to where it's like, in order to survive, it needs both Trinity and Neo. But there's so many scenes where we have characters that are legacy characters say, I don't know why they kept both of you alive, and they never actually officially answer that. And before I turn it over to you, I am going to jump back into the chat. Russell says, to me, it'd be better off as a remake than a fan service may. The fan service may also come across better, which I totally agree with. Matrix coming to Geek Devotions, Matrix Resurrections did to Agent Smith what late Dragon Ball Z did to Gohan. Took him out back and beat him with a Nerf bat until it was a much lesser character. Not having any connections to those films, I will take your word for it, sir.
If you or someone you know is listening to this podcast right now and you're struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, we encourage you guys to please reach out. This is the heartbeat of why we do what we do. Suicide is currently the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, and as of this recording, there are 132 suicides that take place each and every day on American soil. And when you scale back internationally, there are 800,000 successful suicides. That is one death roughly every 40 seconds. So if you or someone you know is struggling, you guys can go to victimsandvillains.net/hope. That resource is going to be right in the description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this. There you'll find resources that include the National Suicide Lifeline, which is 1-800-273-8255. You can also text HELP to 741-741. We also have a plethora of other resources, including churches, getting connected with counselors, LGBT resources like the Trevor Project, and also veteran hotline as well. Please, if you hear nothing else in the show, understand that you listening to this right now, have value and worth. We get it. Suicide, depression, mental health, these are hard topics, and the stigma around them doesn't make it any easier. But please consider the resources right in the descriptions below wherever you guys are listening, because once again, you have value and you have worth. So please stay with us.
So Neil Patrick Harris is doing his best, bit as this guy who is pretty much acts as a beacon for what our society has come into. We live in society now where misinformation, where people who want to live in their fictional realities, where people are willing to put feelings over facts. And it's all good, but what does he add to this? All he is just a creator in name, but he's not an interesting creator by name. Only thing I saw in this character is that was Neil Patrick Harris. I saw Neil Patrick Harris. I didn't see whatever this character was. I don't even know what his name was in the film. I mean, the whole time I just saw Neil Patrick Harris, and that was it. He's this guy, and all he does is just give you monologues, just explaining everything to you about why this new Matrix exists and why he has to do with Neo and Trinity. And hey, it comes to a standoff at the end where he pretty much just wants to keep Neo in the Matrix. Okay, like we'll just do it with you, but and then Trinity could get out. But I thought that you needed both Neo and Trinity to keep this thing going. If you only have one of them, the whole thing is kaput. It's over. And his fear is worried about Trinity realizing who she is. Like she's Tiffany in this film, and she has a family and everything, and she has just become brainwashed to the point where she doesn't remember anything. Okay, I'm cool with that. But then you just all of a sudden just make Trinity become Trinity again, and now all of a sudden she's the one. Now, I want to get into the aspect of making Trinity the one, which I don't have a problem with. But what is the purpose of that when Neo was the one? Is this something now that we can just like people can just all of a sudden just get this power from within the Matrix, and if they break it, they're all of a sudden the one? I don't understand how we can classify people as the one, just when we can, because in the Matrix, it was all about Morpheus having a vision, having his own vision that this was the guy, and having his belief when no one else believed in him. But for Trinity, it's like, no, Trinity is now the one, and nothing else. That's just it.
So, Geek Devotion says that Neil Patrick Harris's name in the film was actually called the Analyst.
Okay.
Which is so dumb. So dumb. I love Neil Patrick Harris in these kind of roles, and he was one of the very few things in this movie that I actually really did love, because I think that he's able to walk the line of campy but also kind of be like that brooding villain. Like he seems like somewhere between like his Gone Girl character mixed with a Spy Kids villain, and the reason I like him is I like him because he's entertaining. To me, I don't think he fits in with the tone of the film, but he's entertaining, and I gotta give him that. Russell says, to me, fan service is done best when uh, not shaved it's not shoved in your face. Um, which, yeah, again, this definitely is. Um, but I think that, to your point about why it switches at the end, where it's no longer Neo being the one, but it is now about Trinity being the one. I think that comes from the fact that we are in a different landscape of cinema now. We have kind of progressed into the mainstream to be this kind of movie going audience that is okay with females taking the center stage. I Wonder Woman's a great example of that. Wonder Woman kind of changed the landscape of these big budget blockbusters being led by a female. And it's a shame that it took us till 2017 to make that happen. But I'm also curious, like, would it have actually be okay? Would something like a Wonder Woman big screen work in 1999? I think that the reason why it's no longer Neo being the one is a reactionary to kind of how the landscape of cinema and movie going audiences have changed since the Matrix revolutions in 2003.
Well, I can understand that. Back to your question about could this survive in the late 90s? I mean, I think in the late 90s, you still had some of the hallmarks of what we would consider, a male dominated, landscape. Of course, you had your Meryl Streeps, you had your Julia Roberts, you had your Glenn Close, you had all these great female actresses, but they wasn't really getting the acclaim nor the attention of what the male stars were getting. You have guys like Harrison Ford, guys like Mel Gibson, all of these guys who are just A-list stars, but it still felt like that women were still searching for a surge of independence. And in 1999, with the Matrix as it was, it would not be as successful as it would have been if the film was focused on Trinity. So I do understand that nowadays, seeing Trinity be a hero, that's nothing new. We have Wonder Woman, we have films like Birds of Prey, we have Black Widow, we have so many more of films across different genres that are giving a voice back to women, and we are putting them in a better light than just being sexual objects or just being people who are acting in the service of male characters or just being damsels is in distress. But in this film, it felt to me, honestly, that Trinity was a damsel in distress. She needed Neo to come and convince her that this was all a lie. She needed Neo to come and save her from what was the Matrix and figure out who she was. And for me, I felt that there was a step back in who Trinity was, because in the series, Trinity is a strong female character. There are times where she comes and plays hero at the sake of Neo. There are times where she has her own moments, where she has her own autonomy. And in this film, Tiffany is almost an afterthought until Neo comes and saves her.
Let me just say that I absolutely love the scene at the end where she just beats up Neil Patrick Harris' character. And before that, he's just like, Tiffany, really? He's like, oh no, it was an inside joke. You wouldn't understand. So it's just a little bit funny there, but yeah, it is really weird. And Geek Devotions makes a good point that, like, it's not necessarily it's not necessarily a bad thing that we are making a female-led Matrix movie with it, quote, being Trinity now being the one. Is that the story itself doesn't actually explain it. And I think it goes back to your explanation from earlier of this being a mess. Russell says even Cruella did fan service better and put a woman front and center and did not over sexualize her. Yeah, that's actually a great example where Cruella had a great cast and it had a compelling story. And even though it's not necessarily one of the best movies of the year in my book, it definitely was able to do its fan service justice. And it never felt over heavy-handed, and it just kind of really humanized this larger-than-life cartoon villain that we've known for since the 50s. But but I want to go back to the landscape of cinema in the 90s, particularly. I think, you talked about like Julia Roberts, Uma Thurman. We talked about like all of these like lands, just absolutely like dynamic leading ladies. But when you look at the films that they are leading, these are Best Picture nods. These are not franchise juggernauts like we're seeing now. Those were always male led, and if you ever had a female that was in that, and this is really going to be showing my age, but Xena Warrior Princess is a great example where here you have a character that is a strong female, but only in the capacity of television. And I don't think, had you taken Lucy Lawless and thrown her into a Wonder Woman, I don't know necessarily that Wonder Woman would have worked in the 90s, because I just, for whatever reason, think that like we weren't there yet as a society. And I think that even now, like we've come a long way, but there's still so much more to go.
Yes, there's a lot more to go. I mean, back to the whole Trinity aspect of the film. What do we do with now Trinity being the one? What does this exactly mean? Does this mean that the Matrix is destroyed? Does this mean that the analyst is just put under control at some point and no other matrices can be made? Because what's to stop them to try to attempt this again? What's to stop anybody trying to continue the war between the humans and the machines? Because the analyst, I assume, will be a part of the machines if he's bringing back the Matrix and everything. And it's like these unanswered questions. And, typically the hallmark of a film that is trying to do too much is that it leaves you with a lot of these unanswered questions. I mean, what do we do about Bugs and her characters? What do we do about, Neo's journey now? I mean, what do we do about saving more people? What do we do about Zion? It's a whole lot. And I felt that when we get into the scenes where we go to Zion and we see Niobe, and she's almost seems like she's just bitter. I don't know. Like it feels like Zion has made a lot of improvements since we last saw it. They're able to grow fruits. They're able to grow food and everything. It's more bright. And
it's called Io now.
Oh, Io. Yeah. So it's got a new name. So it feels like everything is going as it appears. And then we have this dialogue where Niobe is like, "Oh, I never believed in you being the one." And I was like, "Well, did you not learn anything from Revolutions? What this man did?" I felt that would buy him something. That would buy him some cred right there. But it's just something that it's not really developed all that much. And once again, Zion's almost put into the background of this. And the only thing that Niobe can do is just keep reprimanding Bugs for going against the law and doing what is actually right. I mean, I think Bugs is making the right choices here, trying to get this guy back, Neo, who is a hero, who is someone who inspired her and everything, and trying to get him to take down the thing that he's done before. He's done this before. What's to stop him from doing it again? And it seems like Niobe is also, their character doesn't want to live in the past. But why even bring them back then? Why even have Neo do this if even the people that he's supposed to be saving don't want this to happen?
So Geek Devotions actually brings up a valid point, saying that they would have preferred a movie about the creation of Io and see Niobe become who we see her in Resurrections, and then maybe we get this movie. But if you would like to see the story of how she rose to be general, go watch the first season of Gotham. Hadapa. So I want to jump into something. I mean, we've been talking about fan service. We've been talking about a lot of nostalgia here, and there's a line that Morpheus says in this movie. It says, "Nothing comforts anxiety like a little nostalgia," and I just want to spend a couple minutes talking about that because there's so much mental health that's wrapped up in that, and I can't deny that one bit. Like, that is the line that just kind of like tattooed itself onto my soul. And watching this movie is that, that scene in particular, you're getting to kind of see that first encounter of Morpheus, Trinity, and Neo in the Matrix, the first one, for the first time. And I whenever I think I go to like quote darker places, or I need to kind of expose myself to something a little bit lighter, or need to like reset my mental health, like I go to nostalgia. I just ended up like last week, I felt like really overwhelmed by work, and I had just gotten out of the Matrix, and so like I came home, shot the review, and I was like, I need something to just free my mind and just reset myself. And so I ended up throwing in Mean Girls, and literally just like quoted the movie word for word for an hour and a half, and came out of it, being completely just, yes, like I was just in a completely different transformed. And I think that, there's so much value in the power of nostalgia and what it does for our mental health.
If there's a witness to attest to you how powerful nostalgia can be, it's this guy. I mean, I'm a student of pop culture. I study pop culture from the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, even early 2000s. And anytime I see a film that deals with an era, I'm all in, because I love digging back into the past, because oftentimes it teaches us about our present, about where our future can be. And also it's nice just to see, it's also nice to see a comforting image. Like, honestly, anytime I watch Finding Nemo, I don't know, it feels comforting watching a film like that, because I grew up with it. I used to watch it every day as a kid, and now watching it brings back those nice little memories. It's fine. I love nostalgia. You will never hear me spout anything bad about nostalgia, but I'll warn people. Now, nostalgia, oftentimes you live in nostalgia too much, it keeps you from doing anything new. It keeps you from moving forward and trying something, because you want to be stuck in the same mindset, the same viewpoints, and also stuck in a sense of the past, when we should as humans be moving forward. So at the point of celebrating nostalgia, you also have to do something new with that. I would have loved that this film would have took a radical approach to the story. Like, if you're serious about not having the Matrix Resurrections be connected to any of these films, like, oh, don't call it a sequel, don't call it a reboot, it probably has nothing to do with the Matrix. Instead of saying it like that, actually give us a movie like that. When I kept seeing the scenes where they kept showing these flashbacks of all of the first Matrix and Matrix Reload Revolutions, I was like, what are we doing here? Why are we going back to these moments? Anybody who's watching Resurrection should already know these moments by heart. Even if you've seen them once, even if you've seen it recently, you're going to know these moments by heart. Why bring them back? Because it's all about scoring the easy points. And that's something I don't like. It's something that should have been kept, maybe mentioned in some dialogue or whatnot, but not shown throughout the film. I mean, there's a scene where we see Neo taken to this theater, and Morpheus is like, oh, these are just the images of your mind right here. These are things that you had no idea that you had did. And then they make something about how him being dead had knocked him out, and he completely just lost. The machines pumped him with like some kind of thing into his body, which diluted these memories and kept them hidden in the block. It is so all about explaining itself that it's not commendable in telling its own story. It's so busy trying to explain itself and have you remember all these great moments. But what are we doing that is going to take this to the future? What's taking us forward in this series? What's taking us forward in this world? And I don't see anything taking us forward. I just see retreads. I just see walking back and forth in the same direction, but a different year.
There's so much to unpack there. So I'm gonna start first with the nostalgia stake, because you do bring up a valid point. For while nostalgia can decompress you, if you are allowing yourself to get into that headspace too long, it becomes a euphoria, which it can also basically become the same exact thing as an alcohol or drug addiction or pornography addiction, just any addiction. Really, like, it can become to a point where it's really bad at an area where you start to really distance and cut yourself off from the rest of your life. And I think it says a lot about what we end up doing with nostalgia, whether or not it is something that we kind of come to for times of therapy, but whether or not we are also at the same time coming to this as a means of it being a drug, it being, an addiction, and kind of like really harming and distancing ourselves from the rest of the people in our lives. And so, but to your point, particularly about, man, you said so much. There's so much to respond to. Give me a recap real quick.
So pretty much I'm talking about the idea of just bringing back all of these moments, from the past films and not doing anything new with them, just replaying them over and over again to inspire that comforting moments that we talked about with nostalgia, and yet it doesn't move the story forward at all.
So there's actually a scene that's like, so that in the first act when they're like, oh yeah, we're all gonna come back and do a fourth Matrix game, and they're all sitting around at Ex Machina, and they're all talking about what the game should be, and they talk about, it can't be a reboot, it can't be a retooling, it can't be a reselling, it's got to be something new, something hip, something original. And I feel like for the first half of this movie, like, we're led to believe like that's what the original vision for this movie originally was, and then you get into the back half of this movie and all of that is like completely lost, because I think you're right. Like, this film, it doesn't push the story forward. This kind of feels like, if I can compare it to a video game where you have a mission that you're doing from start to finish, but then in these open world games, you can go off and do like side quests and have like side adventures and go exploring. That's what this feels like. Like, this feels on par with the Animatrix and doesn't really feel like it fits within the larger canon that the Wachowskis set out to start in 1999.
How would you guys like to help us get mental health resources into schools, conventions, and other events? Well, now you can. Simply go to patreon.com/victims and villains for as little as $1 a month. You guys can help us get mental health resources into current and upcoming generations, educate and break down stigma surrounding mental health, suicide, and depression. And you get exclusive content that you can't get anywhere else. And you guys can tell us which Nicolas Cage movie you want us to cover, and we'll do it. All it takes to get started is to go to patreon.com/victims and villains, or simply click the link in the episode description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this episode. Pick your tier and get started today. Yes, it's that simple. So quickly select the tier that you want and help us get hope into the hands of the depressed and the suicidal today.
Yeah, at times this feels like a film that was done without their input. I mean, the only thing that is kept really in here is that we have Neo, Trinity, Morpheus in name, because I mean, let me go back to when you were talking about Morpheus' character. Like, from the trailers, I got the sense that Morpheus is going to be an important part of the story, and I didn't expect for him to be another Lawrence Fishburne, but I expected this new take to be something integral. But yet, it's played for parody in a sense. I mean, when we go to the area of in the middle of nowhere, I can't remember what it's called. Somebody in the Twitch comments help me, but they're in the area, and we see Morpheus is pretty much in this wild suit, handing out drinks to Neo, and just pretty much like, haha, well, we had to bring you back. And it's like, what is this, a game now? Is this a joke? And he literally does nothing throughout the film except show up, throughout all these scenes of where they're in Zions and when they're on the ship and whatnot. And he's giving out directives and he's giving out these little moments of dialogue, but he's not memorable. It's not a memorable character. And I remember in an interview, Lana was talking about that this is going to be a new version of Matrix. Well, what is this new version? Is it a less impactful version? Is it a minor version of Morpheus? Because that's what we got in this film. And I don't understand it. I have not read any review that has gone into that. Like, what is Morpheus supposed to do? Because Morpheus was the soul of the original Matrix trilogy.
I'll do you one better. Why is Morpheus?
Yes.
Because like I guess like hearing you talk about it and kind of like remembering like Neil Patrick Harris's like monologue in the end is does like each like version of the Matrix like at its core always have like versions or variations of the characters of like Morpheus, Trinity, and Neo? Because like we talked about this in Reloaded, where the Frenchman reveals that, by the way, is that the Frenchman? Was that the guy supposed to be the Frenchman in this movie? One of the like the weirdest legacy cameos.
Yes, where they're in the train station and he's like dressed like he's like Robin Williams from Jumanji. Yeah, that's the Frenchman.
Like, just the fact that like the camera kept like cutting back to him, I feel like that fight sequence alone sums up the messiness of this entire movie.
Yeah, that fight sequence was all kinds of weird because you have the Frenchman who's on this little spiel in the background, and of course, it's not a 2021 film if you don't mention that Mark Zuckerberg is evil. We get a Facebook reference in his little spiel, and then we get him talking about these other social media sites, and it's like, oh, so you're supposed to be a boomer guy. You're supposed to be the guy who wishes that things were better. And he says this in his conversation that, oh, things were better in my time. Things had class. Things had meaning. Art had something. And it's like, wow, they reduced the Frenchman nothing much to an old person you could find on a Facebook profile. Great. And then the fight itself, have you ever noticed any of the other Matrix films to be this stiff and kind of predictable in action? Because this film had nothing to offer in the action, and that's what I was looking for. I thought the action would have you, at least if the story was bad, I could look at the action and be like, yo, man, this action was exciting. I love this moment, but there's no moments like that. Like I said before, Kenyu and all the other people around him move stiff when they fight. Like, there's no power in any of the punches or the kicks. The editing's bad. The use of the ankles is terrible. And there's no memorable moments in the fight. And this is what the Ages is built upon. They talk about bullet time in the first half of this film and everything and how influential that was. Well, I'm not asking for bullet time. I'm asking for something commendable. I'm asking for something that has passion in it, that features some great fight choreography. But we don't have that. And did they even bring back the people who did the fight and the stunt choreography from the Matrix films? Because it doesn't look like they did. It looks like they just took whatever they could and did these action scenes. And also the cinematography, like, especially during the ending, my God, when Neo and Trinity are riding down the street in the motorcycle, it was almost like the street didn't have any lights. You couldn't hardly see their faces. You couldn't hardly see any of the crowd, the many numbers of crowd people out there. Any of the extras, you couldn't see anything because it was too dark.
Yeah. So specifically about the some of the things you're talking about there, with the whole like action fight choreography, like, to me, that is kind of really what started to like set the nail into the coffin for the second half of the movie. Is it looks like they shot like I don't know if you've ever seen, like, there's a behind the scenes video of how they shot the final fight, like boss fight from Venom between Tom Hardy and Riz Ahmed. And like they're moving just like really slow, and it feels like they took that same concept and brought it down to like half, like to make it even slower. So it looks like you're kind of doing something, and it feels like they're trying to recreate that bullet time, but just they're not successful at it because it's dull, it's uninspiring, and it just doesn't feel like it flows nicely. Now that said, I'm gonna jump in here to the comments section. It says Geek Devotions, can't help but think what this movie would have turned out differently had both Wachowskis worked on the film together. This Morpheus was supposed to, quote, unlock Neo, supposed to, which again, like, doesn't make any sense to me. Like, it kind of just seems like, Morpheus's like whole thing is like he's supposed to find Neo. And like, again, that goes back to my theory is like, is every variation of the Matrix where like these characters are all like trying to find one another and like reconnect, like, to me, like, that just doesn't make any sense. And on the Frenchman's appearance, they said it feels comparable to Bela Lugosi's appearance in Plan 9 from Outer Space. He came in, they did a few test shots, and then made up a scene around that test shot. And could not have said that better.
Yep. It feels like this is a character by name that you just know as Morpheus, and that's all you're given to really work with. But let me get back to the action, because in the beginning, we have a retread of the first scene from The Matrix, where Trinity escapes out of the building, and pretty much just like line for line, almost the same beats. Like Morpheus comes through, but in this time, he's in the position of an agent, which they never really explain what's going on with that either. But then when we have Blue escaping the agents and the cops, did you count the amount of times the screen went into slow motion? Like, I think it was like over at least like 10 or 11 times when Blue was on the screen running away. And she does this move where she jumps over the cop car, she falls onto the ground, and for all of a sudden she's able to slide into a new building. Like, they even show her doing the full slide. She just slides, it cuts back to the agents, and then 2 seconds later she's just in a building, hiding away from the agents. Where did that come from? Don't know. But yes, I love whoever said in the comments how this movie would have been different if we had both of the Wachowski sisters on tap. I always thought it was weird that Lana was the only one who was taking this project on. And that's not me doubting Lana as a writer or director, because, I mean, you don't make films like Bound or V for Vendetta or even the original Matrix without having talent and skill. But I think with a trilogy like this, if you've done all the films together as a duo, why not do the new one as a duo? So it's making me wonder, was there even a full 50-50 agreement about should we continue to do this film? And it feels like this is a movie that the studios just really wanted and didn't care about what it was going to turn out to be. But hey, it's a new Matrix, so we're going to get people in the seats guaranteed.
So Lily actually didn't feel like she had anything left to say with these characters. And that's the reason why she didn't return. And I have to say that I have to have immense amount of respect for that, because like, if I had created these beloved characters, I wouldn't want them to return just for the sake of returning to turn another profit. Like, I would want you look back and you see the social commentary and how groundbreaking the original Matrix was. If I'm going to create a film that is coming 22 years after its foundation, it needs to be something that's going to be equally socially conscious and also quite groundbreaking as well. And I think I brought this up at previous episodes, is the relationship between Alan Moore's Watchmen and Damon Lindelof's Watchmen, where for years they tried to pursue this project, this beloved graphic novel, and bring it into the landscape and the sphere of the cinema, and it never quite happened. Zack Snyder was kind of the guy that ultimately ended up doing it, and it ultimately kind of fell on deaf ears. And what ended up ultimately ended up what was I trying to say? Damon Lindelof, a few years after that film, came in and said, I'm going to sequelize this original source material, and it's going to be timely, and it's going to talk about race, and it's going to be talk about things that history has tried to outwritten, and then somewhere along the way, I'm going to turn this into a love story, and it's going to be compelling, and it's going to be heartbreaking, and you're all going to love it. And I think that that's what this is missing, is that for the first half of this, you're following Thomas, and it feels like there's this character journey of a broken man that's legitimately trying to find out if the events of the first trilogy is real or not. And then you get into the back half where it's like, okay, yes, they are real, and you actually are the one, and we're going to basically recreate the events of the first trilogy in the last hour of this movie.
Yeah, all about doing what is easy and not what's hard. And I do admire Lily for coming out and being honest with herself that she does not have anything more to say, and that's okay. Like we talked about in Matrix Revolutions, that honestly sometimes stories just have an ending, and there's no need to keep beating a dead horse over and over again. And what I feel that the Matrix Resurrections, what its ultimate legacy will be, is that, why bother? That's honestly the two words I can give it. Why bother with this? Why bother if there is not enough effort that's going to be taken into making the action look good? Why bother if we're going to do nothing but almost like cheapen these legacy characters? I don't feel the same power following Neo in this film that I felt in any of the other films. No matter what you can say about Reloaded or Revolutions, I was there with Neo as a character and for his journey. But in this film, I don't feel that. I don't feel it with Trinity. I don't feel it with any of these new characters that they're trying to put on us and everything, that they don't have anything to really show for it. The visual effects, we've gone really a little bit too long without talking about the visuals. The visuals for this film, which I'm sure is probably budgeted over $100 million, looks like this. It tells you where the focus is. It tells you that there is no heart that's being put into this. And I do understand that there are fans of this film. There are a lot of people who like this film. I've seen a lot of 4 and 5-star reviews on Letterboxd. And hey, I salute everybody. If you like this film and you love it, hey, cool with you. You don't have to listen to me and Josh. You can continue to support this film and celebrate it as you should. But for me, coming from a person who's invested into the Matrix and who appreciates the Wachowski sisters for them as directors and writers, it's a step down. And it's something that really doesn't leave a lasting impact. Like, this is not an influential film. This is not something that's going to be studied. This is something that's going to be here today and gone tomorrow. As soon as this leaves HBO Max, what relevance does this film have? This film is not doing too well at the box office. And I don't want to hear anybody say that, oh, this is a pandemic, where the box office, like, no film's doing well. Look at what No Way Home did the last 2 weekends. Look at what No Way Home has done. There's still a business for putting butts in the seats. And even if this film was not critically bad, it's not putting any butts in the seats. Because for one, people don't want to waste their time to the theater watching this. The best decision I made on Christmas was deciding to refund my AMC ticket and decide to sit this one out and watch it home. Because if I would have spent, well, I had AMC Stubs A-list, so it's a free for me, and for my girlfriend, it costs her, but I pay for that. Aside of me saving $14, this film is not worth a big screen experience to me. Visually, it looks like candy at times, like a little lollipop, but does it burst? Does it have any wow moments? No, none at all.
To answer your question, it holds a budget of $190 million. But I think it also should be worth noting that, like, while I have kind of like deconstructed this with you, I think that this doesn't break any like new grounds. Like this, it's really hard to break new grounds, 20 years after your groundbreaking thing of bullet time has been shot to the ground, dug up, and then shot again. And, it's just been parodied beyond belief at this point. But at the same time, this film, I think, to me, like, I really liked the tongue-in-cheek thing. I thought it was interesting to see where these characters ended up all these years later again. But there's so much about it that, for as much as I liked it and for as much as like I had fun with it, like, it is, at the end of the day, it's forgettable. I'm never probably going to watch this again. Celeste, to your point, once it leaves HBO Max, what kind of relevance does it hold? But it should also be worth noting that for as negative as like people like us and like I think Feeling Film talked negatively about this movie as well. You know, this still holds a 66% on Rotten Tomatoes, and I think it holds like an audience score of like 63%. So like, while like yes, a lot of people don't like it, I think for me the reason that I like it is because I like tongue-in-cheek humor, but also at the same time, like, I'm not the hugest Matrix fan, and this is a movie that I feel like I literally could just turn my brain off to, and I didn't have to worry about anything, and all of the nostalgia problems that I had with it, like, it added to that simplicity, and at the end of the day, um, it was a fun time.
Hey, I respect that, man. I respect it. You know me. I mean, we may be distance on this film, but I can appreciate when someone finds something to love in a film that I don't like. I mean, that's the beautiful thing about, oh, of course, The Hunt. Yes, the movie that keeps haunting me and everything. I mean, I wish I was the same way when it comes to a film like The Hunt, but yes, the one thing I can give credit for The Matrix Resurrections that it does do is that, for the first half, there is an attempt to do something different. There are some big, strong ideas that are just waiting to be fertilized in this film. And I wish they were, because it would have given me a different way of looking at everything that's happened in the series, and a different way of looking at these characters, and a different way of looking at the world of the Matrix itself. There have been so many philosophical articles and classes and videos done on the Matrix as a whole and what it stands for. And I love when films do that. I love when films are able to spawn off these like water cooler conversations, or spawn off into where it's being taught in class, and you can see a film so many times over and still not get the whole meaning. And I love that. Sometimes things are better left ambiguous. Sometimes things are just there for you to try to figure them out. And there are no easy answers. That's what I love that. And I think that's what the true legacy of the series is. And Resurrections doesn't do anything to provide any of that. It's fun. I can appreciate that, but it doesn't feel like a part of the Matrix brand. I guess it's the final thing I can say about it.
It doesn't. There's one last thing I want to say too, is like, so like once Neo like actually, there's two things I want to say. Also, the coffee shop that they have in it is literally called Simulate. Like, that's campy genius right there. But also, it's a little bit too on the nose. And two, Neo is like supposed to, like, once he's like actually taking the red pill and he's like all powerful, like he fist fights throughout the entire thing, like all these fights, and then decides to use his like power as a last resort. It's like, bro, like if you would have just started there, we wouldn't be here. Like, I don't know, like that to me like just didn't make any sense.
Nah, it doesn't make any sense at all. Like how Neo has been nerfed in some way or another. Like maybe you can tie that to him being just put on life support by the machines and being his mind diluted to the point where he can't remember these things. But he's still Neo. He still has all his knowledge downloaded into him. All you gotta do is just unlock it by him placing him in the Matrix and him taking the red pill. But no, he's essentially a guy who just does kung fu, karate, and doesn't do anything else. And his power, his big power, only comes for these little like drama moments, but doesn't have the same flavor.
All right, well, I think that's gonna do it for us this on completing the Matrix series, retrospective series, and Resurrections. One more time, where can people find you, and where can people find Feeling Film?
You can find me on Facebook under my real name, Kalesh Davis. You can find me on Letterboxd. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram under the handle Black Nerd Magic. And also you can find Feeling Film on Facebook, Twitter, Letterboxd, Instagram as well. And check out the website. There's a lot of reviews up there from past few years on new films. And also check out the podcast, and also check out Feeling Film Black Label.
Wait, are you guys back on Instagram now?
Feeling Film?
Yeah.
I I thought that we were. I mean, I thought that we were still posting on there as that, but I don't think that we are really using that as much as we're using Facebook and Twitter, you know.
Fair enough. All right. Well, you guys can find me. I'm also on Letterboxd. I'm under the handle Captain Nostalgia. And you guys can find our parent company, Victims and Villains. We are on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, Patreon, and wherever you guys get your podcasts from. Go to victimsandvillains.net, where you guys can find more podcasts like this, movie reviews, and most importantly, all of our social links, and most importantly, all of our mental health resource library. Thank you guys so much for checking out, and I hope you guys have a happy new year, and we'll see you guys in 2022. Have a good one, guys.